My name is Gary. I'm 72 years old. I want to tell you something that took me an embarrassingly long time to admit out loud. When we retired, we basically just had Social Security and a paid off house. We had a little bit in savings, but nothing massive. We were staring down life on a fixed income. Any financial planner looking at our math would have told us we were completely out of our minds. They probably would have been right. But here's the thing about it. We did it anyway. We decided over eggs at the local diner one morning. We just pulled the plug. And everybody tells you to focus on the budget when you do that. Nobody tells you to focus on your actual habits. I kept doing things the exact same way I always did. I was treating retirement like a job I had to conquer. It nearly drove my wife, Diane, completely crazy. It nearly drove me crazy, too. People think this whole thing is about all the new things you start doing. They think it is about adding expensive hobbies and taking big trips. But the truth is entirely different. The first few years are really about what you have to stop doing. You have to subtract things from your day, and nobody is being honest about how incredibly hard that subtraction actually is. You wake up on a Tuesday morning in November. It is freezing cold outside here in the Midwest. You are out of bed before the furnace even kicks on. You are rushing out to the kitchen in the pitch dark. You are moving fast to make the coffee. You are rushing around like there is a fire. And then you just stand there by the sink. You realize you have absolutely nowhere to be. You are rushing for no reason at all. And that feels completely ridiculous. Not good weird, just weird. You feel entirely lost in your own house. It is a heavy, uncomfortable feeling in your chest. You feel like you are wasting time, but there is no time to waste anymore. I'm not going to give you a 5-step system to fix that today. I don't have a master plan for any of this. I don't know the secrets to the universe. I'm just going to tell you what happened to us. I'm going to tell you what Diane and I eventually figured out. It really hit me about 6 months after I officially hung up my brushes. My knees were completely shot. That is the main reason I retired, basically. I couldn't be up on the extension ladders the same way anymore. I couldn't supervise the young guys on the crew without hurting, so I just wound the painting business down. But my brain clearly didn't get the memo. It was a cold Tuesday. I was up at 5 in the morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table drinking bad coffee. I had a yellow legal pad out on the table. I was writing down a massive list of chores. I needed to fix the back step. I needed to clean the gutters out. I needed to reorganize the tool bench. I was pricing out lumber and caulk in my head. I was treating my own house like a commercial job site. Diane came downstairs. She walks every single morning. She had her heavy winter coat on already. She just stood there in the doorway looking at me. She looked at my messy notepad. She looked down at my feet. I was actually wearing my heavy leather work boots inside the house. I had them laced up tight just to sit at the table. She said, real quiet, that I didn't work for anybody anymore. She said I was acting like a terrible boss to myself. She was absolutely right. I was exhausting both of us with my nervous energy. I was trying to turn my retirement into a construction project. That is when I knew something major had to change. So I want to go through 5 very specific things I've noticed. 5 things I personally had to stop doing. Things I really wish someone had pulled me aside and told me to quit right on day 1. I'm just going to lay them out for you plainly. The first thing I had to stop doing was setting my alarm clock. Well, I didn't even use a real physical clock anymore. It was just a stubborn internal clock I couldn't turn off. For 40 years, I was up at 4:30 in the morning. I had to meet the guys at the shop. I had to get the work trucks loaded up with paint and drop cloths. I had to make sure the equipment was ready to go. When I retired, I kept waking up at that exact same minute. I would lie there in the pitch dark. My heart would be racing like crazy. I felt like I was late for something incredibly important. I would get up and just pace around the living room floor. I would check the lock on the front door 3 times. I would look out the window at the empty street. Diane would tell you I was like a trapped bird in the house. I couldn't sit still for 5 minutes. The quiet of the early morning actually gave me anxiety. Finally, she made me stay in bed. She told me to just look at the ceiling until the sun actually came up. It was pure agony at first. I felt incredibly lazy. I felt completely useless. I watched the shadows move slowly across the bedroom wall. I would mentally paint the ceiling while I laid there. I noticed every single roller mark from 10 years ago. I noticed where the tape lines were slightly crooked. But after a few weeks of fighting it, my body finally gave up. I stopped fighting the mattress. I started sleeping until 6. Then sometimes I even made it to 7. That's when I figured out that rest isn't a weakness. Your body holds on to workplace stress for decades. You have to actively give it permission to finally let go. It doesn't just happen overnight. You have to force yourself to rest until it becomes natural. I also had to stop buying the cheapest possible version of everything. This one is really hard to break. When you are living mostly on Social Security, you watch every single nickel. I always did anyway, my whole life. I never bought the name brand if the generic was sitting right there. But I took it way too far in retirement. I needed new shoes for walking around the neighborhood. My old work sneakers had a massive hole in the left heel. They smelled like mineral spirits and old grass. I went to the big discount store out on the highway. I walked past all the decent shoes. I bought a pair of off-brand shoes for $29. They felt like walking on literal plywood. The soles were basically just hard plastic. I wore them for about a week. My bad knees were screaming at me. Every step on the concrete sidewalk sent a shock straight up my legs. My lower back was completely locked up by noon every day. Diane looked at me limping around the kitchen making lunch. I was wincing every time I shifted my weight. She told me to get in the car immediately. She drove me to the real old-fashioned shoe store downtown, the one that has been there since the 70s. The guy there actually measured my feet with that metal sliding thing. He watched how I walked across the carpet. He brought out these heavy-duty supportive walking shoes. They were ugly, but they looked sturdy. They were $140. I almost choked right there in the chair. I absolutely refused to pay it. I started lacing my old shoes back up. Diane just handed the man her debit card. She looked at me and said, "We aren't rich." But she said, "We can afford your knees to work." She told me to stop being so stubborn about taking care of myself. She was right. I put the new shoes on and walked to the car without limping. That's when I figured out that being cheap can actually cost you more. It costs you your physical mobility. You have to spend money on the things that keep you moving. You can't put a discount price tag on your own joints. You aren't saving money if you are too hurt to leave the house. Now, I also had to stop competing with the neighbors over the yard. I really had to let the yard wars go. Our neighbor Dave is a very nice guy. He retired a few years before I did. He used to manage a bank branch or something like that. His lawn looks like a professional golf course. There is not a single weed in his grass. He edges the sidewalks twice a week without fail. He washes his shiny truck every Sunday morning. He sweeps his driveway with a push broom just for fun. When I retired, I thought I had to keep up with him. I felt this weird pressure to match his energy outside. I thought people would judge me if my grass got a little long. I bought a fancy gas-powered pressure washer because it was on sale. That was a $200 lesson right there. I thought it would make me look busy and productive to the rest of the street. I spent 3 exhausting days blasting our concrete driveway. The machine was loud and smelled like cheap gas. My hands were vibrating even after I turned it off. I blasted the vinyl siding on the house. I actually held the wand too close at one point. I almost took the paint completely off the garage door. I made a huge muddy mess in the flower beds. I was totally wiped out. My shoulders were killing me. My ears were ringing. Dave came over while I was packing the heavy rubber hoses up. He stood there with his hands in his pockets. He pointed out that I missed a small spot near the mailbox. I honestly almost threw the heavy wand right at his head. I just forced a smile instead. I told him I would get it next time. I put the washer in the back of the garage. I pushed it behind some old paint buckets. It is still sitting right there today, collecting dust. I don't know why we do this to ourselves. We just trade the stress of the workplace for the stress of the neighborhood. We invent new bosses to impress. That's when I figured out I don't care about the driveway at all. I don't care if there is a little moss growing on the concrete. I care about my peace and quiet. I decided to just let the driveway be a little dirty. Dave can have the best yard on the block. I am completely fine with second place. I would rather sit on the porch with a coffee than fight a pressure washer all afternoon. Another thing I had to learn. I had to stop jumping every time my adult kids had a crisis. I love my kids very much. Our youngest, Todd, is 38 years old now. He is a good kid. He means well. But he always has some minor disaster going on in his life. His car breaks down unexpectedly on his way to work. His apartment water heater leaks and ruins his cheap rugs. He just gets in a bind a lot. He lives paycheck to paycheck, and the math never quite works out for him. While I was working, I would just drive right over there. I would bring my heavy tool bags and fix the plumbing for him. I would spend my Saturday under his sink. Or I would just write him a check to cover the mechanic bill. When you retire, the kids still think you are the walking emergency fund. They forget that your income stopped growing. Todd called me last winter in a complete panic. He said his car's transmission was slipping badly. It wouldn't shift out of second gear. He needed $800 right away to get a rebuilt one put in. My stomach dropped immediately. I felt my chest get tight. I panicked too. We did not have $800 sitting around to just give away. We only had our small emergency savings. That money was supposed to be for our own roof or our own medical bills. I told Diane I was going to take a part-time job at the hardware store, just to help him out for a few months. I figured I could mix paint on the weekends. She looked at me like I was completely insane. She set her coffee mug down hard on the table. She said, "Todd is a grown man with a full-time job." She said he is almost 40 years old. She said he will figure it out on his own. She told me I was not going back to work just to fix his car. I had to call him back and say no. It was the hardest phone call I ever made in my life. I felt terrible for days. I felt like I was failing him as a father. I worried about him getting fired for missing work. But you know what? He figured it out. He took the city bus for a week until payday. Then he financed a repair with the mechanic shop. He complained about it, but he survived. The world did not actually end. I don't fully understand why it took me so long to see it. But that's when I figured out that constantly saving them was actually hurting me. And it wasn't really helping them grow up either. We have to protect our own security first. We can't set ourselves on fire just to keep our kids warm. Finally, I had to stop pretending to be incredibly busy all the time. I had to stop making up useless chores just to look productive. This is a pretty embarrassing one to admit to you. I spent the first year of retirement acting like I was still on the clock. I would literally walk around the house with a flathead screwdriver in my pocket. I would tighten cabinet hinges that weren't even loose. I would go out and reorganize the garage shelves that I just organized last week. I would take all the screws out of the baby food jars and sort them by size again. I would sweep a garage floor that was already perfectly clean. I felt deeply guilty sitting on the couch at 2 in the afternoon. I felt like somebody was going to catch me slacking off. I felt like a general contractor was going to walk around the corner and yell at me for wasting daylight. I would check the mail 3 times a day just to have a reason to walk down the driveway. I was terrified of being seen as useless. Diane caught me out by the patio one afternoon. I was lubricating the metal track on the sliding glass door. It was the 3rd time I did it in a single month. I was spraying WD-40 on a door that slid with one finger. She just sighed loudly. She came over and took the spray can out of my hand. She said, "Gary, the door slides perfectly fine. You are going to ruin the bearings if you keep messing with it." She told me to put the tools away and just go sit down. She pointed to the living room. I went inside and sat on the couch. I stared blankly at the living room wall. It felt completely illegal to do nothing. I was waiting for an alarm to go off. My leg was bouncing up and down nervously. I kept thinking about the weeds out by the fence, but eventually I got used to it. The quiet stopped scaring me so much. I learned how to just sit and watch the dust motes in the sunlight. I learned how to let an afternoon just drift by without trying to control it. That's when I figured out that doing nothing is actually a valid activity. Rest is a perfectly fine way to spend a random Tuesday afternoon. You worked hard for 40 years. You paid your dues in sweat and early mornings. You earned the right to just sit still. You don't have to earn your spot in the armchair every single day. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I have it all figured out perfectly now. I certainly do not. I am still learning how to be retired. Some months the money gets a lot tighter than others. We still have to watch the grocery bills very closely. Some days I still wake up feeling a little bit lost and confused. I still mess these things up. I still get anxious for absolutely no logical reason when the house is too quiet. I still catch myself rushing when I have nowhere to go. But mostly things are okay. The days are a lot quieter now. My mind is a lot quieter too. We are making it work on exactly what we have. We aren't starving and we aren't miserable. It is a lot more okay than I ever expected, honestly. And I think that is a fact worth saying out loud today. If any of this sounds like your current situation, leave a comment down below. Tell me how you are handling the transition. I want to know something specific from you. What is the one old working habit you had to force yourself to break when you retired? What was the absolute hardest thing to stop doing? I read the comments you guys leave, I really do. I find those real stories way more useful than you would think. It really helps to know we are not the only ones figuring this out as we go. You learn a lot just by reading what other regular folks are doing to get by. And if you want more of this kind of talk, just stick around with us. We don't do fancy financial theories or complicated spreadsheets here. We don't pretend to be experts on anything. We just talk about the everyday reality of it. That is what we do here. All right, that is all I've got for you today. Take care of yourselves.